What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Listen to the podcast available on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode, you can submit them in the DMs on Instagram at JT_Sports_ or on Twitter at JT_Sports__. Once again, if you have a question that you would like potentially answered on a future episode, submit them in the DMs. You can find us on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on Twitter at JT_Sports__. On this episode, we're going to be discussing: is Jim Harbaugh overrated? Why the Florida Gators are in trouble? And is Texas Tech ready to break through this upcoming college football season? A couple of days ago, me and my guy Juice, aka Jamont, we got into a really heated debate about the topic of if Jim Harbaugh is overrated. So he went on Twitter and he tweeted out, Jim Harbaugh has won 0 playoff games during the 8 seasons he has been at Michigan. Yet it seems like everyone has decided to line up and give him a bunch of participation trophies. Hashtag overrated. Now, I clap back against this. I said that Jim Harbaugh is not overrated. During the 8 seasons that he's been a head coach at Michigan, he has a win-loss record of 74-25. And he also has 5 seasons with 10 wins or more. Do you know how many 10-plus win seasons that Michigan has had since 2000 before Jim Harbaugh arrived in Ann Arbor? Only 3. And he also is the first Michigan head coach since Lloyd Carr to win the Big Ten championship. The last time Michigan won a Big Ten championship before Jim Harbaugh got there was in 2004. It was nearly 2 decades since Michigan won the Big Ten championship. And not only that, but Michigan, prior to Jim Harbaugh, with the previous 2 head coaches they had before him, and Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, those guys didn't really do a good job at recruiting and developing the talent that they brought in. Now, they did have 2 top 10 classes, but most of those guys didn't really pan out. They didn't make it to the NFL, and most of them really didn't have a significant impact on the Wolverines football program. So you bring in Jim Harbaugh. He recruits at a pretty consistent level. He does a really good job at developing players and getting them to the NFL. And not only that, but he has Michigan at a state that they haven't been since the damn late 90s. Like, people make it seem like Jim Harbaugh was taking over a blue chip national championship caliber program when he first arrived at Michigan. Like, Michigan was not what they are right now when he first got there. When he first got there, we already knew it was going to be a little bit of time until Michigan got to a level where they could consistently compete for national championships. Now, it's not like Jim Harbaugh had a terrible crapshoot that he was walking into. It wasn't the worst situation, but prior to him getting there, I only remember Michigan football for 3 things: losing to Appalachian State, having Denard Robinson at quarterback, and that other quarterback they had that had number 98, Devin Gardner. Those were the only 3 things I knew about Michigan football prior to Jim Harbaugh arriving on the scene. And the only knocks that I've really had about Jim Harbaugh is that it took him a very long time to beat Ohio State. Okay? And not just that, but he also has had a couple of head-scratching losses. He doesn't really have a great track record against Michigan State. They kind of get the best of him. But other than that, Jim Harbaugh has probably been the best head coach that Michigan has had in a very long time. So I don't really get the sentiment of Jim Harbaugh being overrated. People act like he took over a national championship level program when he first got there. Like, it took him a while to get Michigan to the point that they are right now. And I don't think winning back-to-back Big Ten championships and making it to the college football playoffs for 2 consecutive years in a row are participation trophies. Do you know what it took for Michigan to get to the Big Ten championship game? They had to beat Ohio State and what probably is the biggest rivalry game in all of football. Beating Ohio State isn't just something that you gloss over. To get to the Big Ten championship, to have a chance at making it to the college football playoffs, you have to beat Ohio State. And even if you don't beat them, if you lose to them, you only got to have one loss. Beating Ohio State is a huge milestone. That's not just something you gloss over and count as a participation trophy. Winning back-to-back Big Ten championships are not participation trophies. Like Jim Harbaugh, what he has done at Michigan, the previous head coaches haven't been able to do. Like Michigan hasn't been at this national championship level since the damn 90s. Jim Harbaugh deserves a lot of props for what he's done over the last couple of years at Michigan. Although it has taken him a bit of time, it probably should have happened sooner. But hey, better late than never. So I don't really get how people out there can call Jim Harbaugh overrated. Now, is he a top 5 or top 3 coach in college football? I'm not saying he is, but I do like to think that he is top 10. I mean, the dude does a really good job at recruiting, developing guys, and getting them ready for the next level. Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, those guys weren't able to recruit consistently at the level that Jim Harbaugh does. And plus, they didn't do a good job at getting guys to the NFL. Most of the recruiting classes that they brought in that were somewhat decent, most of those guys didn't even pan out. So for Jim Harbaugh to be considered overrated, I think it's just a tad bit disrespectful. To call what he's done the last 2 seasons as participation trophies is kind of undermining what he's done to this Michigan football program. Once again, he wasn't taking over Alabama. He wasn't taking over a Georgia or a USC. Michigan, prior to Jim Harbaugh getting there, wasn't a program that was competing for national championships year in and year out. Like the level that he has Michigan at right now is a level that this program hasn't been at in decades. So how is he overrated? I don't get that. Like people make it seem like if you don't win a national championship within your first 3 to 4 seasons, you're an overrated head coach. Like people try to do this same nonsense with Kirby Smart. And it's ironic because me and Juice had this same argument about Kirby Smart a couple of years ago, and I told him, bro, you got to give Kirby Smart some time. You got to give the brother some time. And Lord and behold, look what Kirby Smart is doing now. Same thing with Lincoln Riley when he was at Oklahoma, when he was at USC. It takes time to build a championship level program when you're taking over a program that hasn't been competing for championships since the late 90s. I wasn't even born then. I cannot get behind people who try to undermine what Jim Harbaugh has done with this Michigan football program. Nobody expected Michigan, coming off their disastrous 2020 season, to make it to the college football playoffs. Most Michigan fans were expecting for that team in 2021 to win 9 to 10 games. If anybody told you they were making it to the college football playoffs and they were going to beat Ohio State, most people would have laughed at you. They would have been like, man, Michigan ain't going to beat Ohio State, man. They say this every year. And then when it finally happened and they finally won the Big Ten championship game and they went to the college football playoffs and they got blown out by Georgia, nobody was clowning them. Nobody was calling Jim Harbaugh overrated. You want to know why? Because what he did was exceed expectations. And what did he do the following season last year? He followed up on that by once again beating Ohio State again and winning the Big Ten championship again and making it to the college football playoffs. Now, I will say this. Michigan had no business losing to TCU. Not trying to take anything away from TCU. They had a fantastic season, but Michigan was a favorite in that game. Michigan was a more talented team than TCU. that coaching staff, that whole entire team, they underperform in that game. But other than that, I don't really have any huge knocks on Jim Harbaugh. To call what Jim Harbaugh has done the last couple of years as participation trophies, I just think it's just undermining the job that he's done with this program. This program was not competing at the level they are now a decade ago. Before Jim Harbaugh got there, Michigan football was having some really gloomy days up there in Ann Arbor. I really don't get how people can consider Jim Harbaugh being overrated. Now, last season, right, a lot of Florida fans were making it seem like Anthony Richardson was the problem with the offense and he was holding the Gators offense back, right? So I was really excited since Anthony Richardson was the reason for why the Gators offense was being held back and him completing 53% of the passes. I was really excited to see who was going to be the next quarterback for the Florida Gators going into this season. And then I get some news that pops up on my phone that Graham Mertz has transferred to the University of Florida. And I ain't do nothing but laugh. So people are going to knock Anthony Richardson, right? But then they're going to bring in Graham Mertz. And then the spring game happens. And Graham Mertz performs at the way that we all thought he would. And then, not just that, but you got Jack Miller, who also didn't perform well in the spring game. So people want to blame AR for holding back Florida's offense. They just want to scapegoat AR and put all of Florida's offensive problems on him. And yet, you watch that spring game, and the offense looks even worse than what it did last year with Anthony Richardson, the guy who Gators fans tried to say couldn't complete a pass accurately to save his life. The only thing he could do is run. They tried to say that he was playing to protect himself because he didn't want to get injured. Like, it was so crazy how the Gators fan base, not all of you guys, but a lot of you guys just changed on Anthony Richardson. Like, week one after he had that spectacular performance against Utah, you guys were hyping this guy up to be the next great Florida quarterback since Tebow. And then he has a couple of bad games, and then all of a sudden, the fan base just turns on him. And it's not like Anthony Richardson had a bad season last year. It was his first year starting. He was learning a new system with a new head coach. And plus, this guy was fairly inconsistent. I don't think he was bad, okay? If the dude was bad and he was garbage and he couldn't play, I promise you he wouldn't have gotten drafted 4th overall by the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson, was he great? No, he wasn't. But was he bad? I don't think he was. He was inconsistent. And that was a large reason why many people said that Anthony Richardson should have returned to Gainesville for another season. But to say that Anthony Richardson was holding back Florida's offense, I think you're a little bit crazy. Because did you not see the shit that you put out in that spring game? And you got Florida fans trying to say, man, it's just the spring game, man. Like, we got time to improve. Like, our defense was looking really good. Yeah, your defense was looking really good, but then you want to point out the fact that you were missing a couple of starters on the offensive line to try to make up excuses for why the quarterback play was as bad as what it was. That doesn't make any sense to me. And you want to know something? The Gators are going to be in a lot of trouble this season, not just with their quarterback situation, but you also got to think about this. Do you remember what people were saying about Justin Herbert when he was coming out of Oregon after his final season? They were saying a lot of similar things. They were saying Justin Herbert is going to be a future bust. He wasn't good at Oregon. And then he goes to the Chargers and he has the greatest rookie season ever for a first-year quarterback. And then everybody's saying, wow, like, how was he not this good at Oregon? Oregon's offense, surprise, surprise, was holding him back. So imagine if Anthony Richardson ends up going off year one this year for the Indianapolis Colts. That's going to be a really bad look on Florida's coaching staff, because then if you're a transfer portal quarterback or you're a potential high school recruit and you're thinking about going to Florida to play QB, you look at Anthony Richardson balling out in the NFL, you ask yourself, why wasn't he able to do that at Florida? But yet, Gator fans try to make it seem like he was the problem. You see, I'm not trying to say that Anthony Richardson was flawless, but I do think that not enough Florida fans put enough blame on the offensive play calling last year. Billy Napier, I have a lot of faith and confidence in Billy Napier. I watched a lot of him when he was at Louisiana Lafayette with the Raging Cajuns, and he had Levi Lewis at QB, and you had Elijah Mitchell at running back. I'm a big fan of Billy Napier. But when he got Anthony Richardson, he got a Lamborghini, and he basically treated it like it was a Honda Civic with the conservative offense that he was running. Like, his offense wasn't great. I don't think his offense really maximized all of Anthony Richardson's potential and his talent, which is why when Anthony Richardson ends up going off for the Indianapolis Colts, people are going to start asking and looking at Billy Napier and that coaching staff, and they're going to be like, damn, Anthony Richardson was that bad, but yet he's balling out for the Indianapolis Colts. That's going to be a really bad look. And you look at the quarterback situation. Graham Mertz, dog, are you serious? You got what? Anthony Richardson was so bad, but you go from him to Graham Mertz? What are we doing? How many games is Florida going to win this season? Because right now they have an over-under win total right now of 5.5. And to be honest with you, I think there's a good chance that they don't even make it to a bowl game this season. They're playing in the SEC East. You got to play Georgia. You got to play Tennessee. Kentucky is going to be really good this year. I mean, bro, that's like 3 automatic losses. And the good thing for Anthony Richardson is that even though he wasn't the most polished passer, he was an incredible athlete. And his athleticism got Florida out of a lot of jams last year. You don't have that athleticism in Graham Mertz or Jack Miller. Florida just had the lowest scoring spring game in program history. And yet, you look at the Florida Gators. This offense, it was so bad with Anthony Richardson at the helm at QB, but yet, it looks even worse with Graham Mertz and Jack Miller. They really went into the transfer portal and got Graham Mertz. And there were really fans trying to get behind this. Now, most of you Gators fans, to your credit, you knew what you were getting in Graham Mertz. You weren't expecting anything crazy. But there were really people out there who were trying to say, man, Graham Mertz can't be no worse than what Anthony Richardson was throwing the football. Like, all Anthony Richardson did was throw the ball in the damn dirt. Well, that's all I saw Jack Miller and Graham Mertz doing in the spring game was throwing the ball in the damn dirt. This offense looked atrocious. And even though you were down a couple of starters, there's only so much improvement that this offense can make within the span of now to the start of week 1 against Utah. Like, if you guys were to play Utah today right now, they would drag y'all. Now, they probably wouldn't do y'all extremely bad. They probably wouldn't blow y'all out because y'all defense, I do believe, is going to improve with y'all new defensive coordinator. But this offense right now is in a lot of trouble. And it's not like you guys have a completely bad roster. The wide receiving core, you got Pretty Ricky, you got Xavier Henderson, you have one of the best running back rooms in all of college football, but you don't have a good quarterback. And you're not Georgia. You don't have a Todd Monken calling the plays where he can take a guy like a Graham Mertz or a Jack Miller and elevate him like how Todd Monken did with Stetson Bennett. You're not at that level. You don't have that talent. You don't have a talented enough team that can carry a guy like Graham Mertz or Jack Miller and make those guys look better than what they are, like Georgia did with Stetson Bennett. Florida right now is in a lot of trouble. I held back on making this segment because I thought that Billy Napier was going to go into the transfer portal and bring in some help. Like Auburn, I love Robbie Ashford, and I'm pretty sure Hugh Freeze does too. But he went ahead and he got Panthorn out of the transfer portal. He went ahead and got some additional help at quarterback. So I was thinking that Billy Napier and them were going to do the same. And apparently they got their NIL collective together. So I was thinking that they were going to go ahead, spin the bag, and go ahead and bring in a good transfer quarterback. But nah, they opt to go with Graham Mertz and Jack Miller into this season. Like, how can any of you Florida fans expect this offense to be better than what it was with Anthony Richardson? This offense looks really bad. Really bad. I mean, we thought that Florida was going to somewhat make some strides and improvement after last season. We were thinking that they were going to go into the transfer portal and get a quarterback after everything that went wrong with the Jalen Rashada situation. Some people thought that they were going to get Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, but there are some rumors out there that said that didn't end up happening because he didn't have the grades or whatever was the reasoning. But Florida doesn't have a damn quarterback. And this team, you know, they got some talent. It's just that they don't really have the quarterback situation settled. And I'm a big fan and a big believer in Billy Napier, but I'm kind of a little bit disappointed in how he's went about this situation. And you can say, well, JT, like, we knew this was going to take time. This was going to be a rebuild. But it's like in this day and age of the NIL era and the transfer portal era, if you have holes, you should be able to go into the transfer portal and fix them. Drop a bag, spin that bread, get a good QB in there, and let's go win some damn football games. Like, come on, you went into the transfer portal and got Graham motherfreaking Mertz? Are you serious? I was watching Florida spring game like 3 times, and what blew me was how they were telling the story about how Billy Napier called Paul Chryst before they offered Graham Mertz just to get another opinion on him. Like, you think that Paul Chryst is going to just crap on Graham Mertz? Like, of course the dude is going to gas him up. He recruited him. The dude was the quarterback of the worst offense in the damn Big Ten. You talk about Anthony Richardson holding back Florida's offense last year. Graham Mertz was holding Wisconsin's offense hostage. I really think that the Gators are in a lot of damn trouble going into this season with what I saw from that damn spring game. You guys made it seem like Anthony Richardson was so awful. But yeah, you go from him to Graham Mertz. A lot of you guys are going to be wishing when this season starts that you had Anthony Richardson again. You are. You guys are going to miss Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson was not bad. He wasn't great. He was just inconsistent. He was young. He got drafted 4th overall by the Indianapolis Colts for a reason. And a lot of the Indianapolis coaching staff, they're really excited about Anthony Richardson. There's been reports that Anthony Richardson is better than what initially was reported when he was first coming out of Florida. People were saying he was a raw passer. He didn't have good pocket presence. Well, all of those things, the Indianapolis Colts coaching staff, they're praising. His teammates, Jonathan Taylor, the rookie wide receiver, Josh Downs, that they drafted from UNC, they've been hyping Anthony Richardson up. Like, everybody in the Colts organization is excited about Anthony Richardson. So if he ends up going off this year, what does that say about Billy Napier and Florida's coaching staff? Anthony Richardson goes to the NFL and balls out despite everybody expecting him to be a bust and not having the greatest season at Florida. But yet, he ends up going to the league and performing at a really high level, better than what he did in college. That's not going to be a good look on Billy Napier. And when you think about these high school recruits that are quarterbacks that are thinking about going to Florida, or potential transfer portal QBs who are thinking about going to the University of Florida, and they see AR balling out in the NFL, but yet they look back on what he did his final season at Florida, they probably would think twice about going to UF. Because if you can't get Anthony Richardson playing at a high level and he's performing better at the professional level than he was at a collegiate level, that's a problem. Normally, You have quarterbacks who ball out in college and struggle to make the jump in the NFL because it's a different ball game. It's more difficult. So why would Anthony Richardson struggle in college but yet be good in the NFL? Make it make sense, people. 1 + 1 = 2, not 3 or 4. You guys are going to be in for a long-ass season with Graham Mertz and Jack Miller at the helm at quarterback. I promise you, you guys are not going to shock the world. You guys aren't going to get all that better. Your defense is probably going to be able to carry you in a couple of games. But if you're really going to put your faith in Graham Mertz and Jack Miller being able to potentially win you 6 or more games, I think you're kind of lying to yourself. I think you're kind of trying to get yourself excited about these quarterbacks when you really should just be real with yourself. Many of you guys who were harping on Anthony Richardson not being good, you guys are going to be in for a rude reality check when you play Utah week 1. And you're not going to have that superstar ability that AR had to bail you out. You're going to have Graham Mertz or Jack Miller starting under center for you this year, and it's not going to be pretty. Anthony Richardson, you say this guy, all he did was throw balls in the dirt. I saw Graham Mertz overthrow an easy RPO pass in Florida spring game. Right, the dude, it was just a simple RPO run pass option. The dude is wide open in the middle of the field, and Graham Mertz overthrows him. All he was doing was putting balls in the dirt. Like, what was Graham Mertz's completion percentage at Wisconsin? Let me go ahead and look this up while I'm at it. Since everybody wants to harp on Anthony Richardson completing 53 and 55% of his passes, let's see what Graham Mertz did his final season at Wisconsin. I really want to see what was his completion percentage at Wisconsin, since people want to use that to harp on damn Anthony Richardson. This dude threw 19 touchdowns and 10 interceptions last year, and he completed 57.3% of his passes. He ain't no better. He looked worse. This dude threw 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Wasn't that the same stat line AR had last year? And plus, he had -40 rushing yards. This ain't no damn upgrade. If anything, you kind of downgraded, because now you don't have the athleticism. And we know that Jack Miller, he probably ain't the answer neither. We saw what he did against Oregon State. You can say, well, JT, we have like 20-something players out. Okay, cool. But this dude wasn't even good in last year's spring game. He wasn't good in last year's spring game, and he didn't show any signs of improvement in this year's spring game. Oh, well, the offensive line wasn't good, but your defense is so great, though. Which one is it? You see, that's the thing about these spring games. You don't really know what to decipher, what to gather. I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan. Tyler Van Dyke was not good last year, but it was mainly because of Josh Gattis. And the spring game this year rolls around and Tyler Van Dyke looks much better with a new offensive coordinator. So you look at Florida right now, and you look at their quarterback situation, they're in a lot of trouble. And for all you guys who were nagging on Anthony Richardson, saying the guy was a bum, he was jabroni, he wasn't good, he couldn't throw an accurate pass, go back and watch that spring game. I didn't really see any improvement. The quarterback position looks like a little bit of a downgrade. I promise you, when you guys play Utah week 1, you're going to be wishing you had Anthony Richardson. You are. You guys kind of took Anthony Richardson for granted. Billy Napier, his offense, didn't really do a good job at putting Anthony Richardson in situations to succeed. Yeah, they were able to use him on a couple of zone reads and design quarterback runs. And yeah, they tried to push the ball downfield at times. But for the most part, the dude didn't have the greatest wide receiving core. You weren't really all that deep at the position. The run game was pretty good, but that was about it. This offense was conservative. You had a Lamborghini and you treated it like a Honda Accord. So if you're having this conservative offensive philosophy for Anthony Richardson, what are you going to do with Graham Mertz? Like, Graham Mertz, if anything, he needs way more coaching because he's not as talented as Anthony Richardson. And he's not a more accurate passer than him. He's not a better quarterback than him. I'll take Anthony Richardson over Graham Mertz or Jack Miller any day of the week. And I'd probably take a handful more quarterbacks over Graham Mertz and Jack Miller. I mean, Kentucky went in the transfer portal and got Devin Leary, former quarterback for NC State. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. Alabama, they had some concerns about their quarterback position, so guess what they did? They went in the transfer portal and they got Tyler Buchner. Last year, when Brian Kelly first arrived in Louisiana, guess what he did? He went in the transfer portal and got Jaden Daniels. You see, Florida is too big of a program to be going in and trying to rehabilitate guys. This isn't going to be a Bo Nix or Michael Penix situation. Graham Mertz wasn't good at Wisconsin. You want to say, hey, y'all was holding back Florida's offense? Well, Graham Mertz was holding Wisconsin's offense hostage. I promise you that a lot of Wisconsin fans are really happy that Graham Mertz is gone. And I promise you that a lot of opposing defenses are really upset that Graham Mertz is gone, because every time you played against Wisconsin, you had a good chance to look really good on defense and have some really good film when you played against Wisconsin, because you knew Graham Mertz was going to throw you a lot of duck balls, and you knew that Graham Mertz was going to make you look good because the guy wasn't a good QB at Wisconsin. The guy isn't going to be all that better at Florida. If anything, he's going to look worse. He's going to look worse. Florida's in a lot of trouble right now. I hate the fact that some of you all tried to scapegoat Anthony Richardson. Turn on this man, try to say he quit on the team, he quit on the program, he was only thinking about himself. This is the same guy who recently, after the Indianapolis Colts had early breakfast, he stayed after to help the janitors clean up. They said, Anthony Richardson, you don't got to do this. You don't got to stay after to help us clean up. You're the 4th overall pick of the draft. You're above this. He said, no, like, it's not fair that we left this mess for y'all. This is the same Anthony Richardson that stayed after several games in the parking lot, signing autographs for fans, throwing passes to people's kids. And yeah, you guys had the nerve to turn on this man. Now, Texas Tech, they had a really good first season under head coach Joey McGuire. They went 8-5. This was their best season since 2013. They beat Texas and Oklahoma for the first time in program history. They ended last season on a 4-game win streak. They beat the brakes off Ole Miss in their bowl game. They had their highest ranked recruiting class since 2011. And they currently have the 4th best odds to win the Big 12 this year, behind Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas State. Now, are the Red Raiders ready to break through this upcoming season? Because they returned 75% of their offensive production from last year. They returned 52% of their defensive production from last season. And when you look at some of their biggest games that they're going to be playing this year, most of them are going to be at home. You play Oregon at home, Kansas State at home, TCU at home. And then late in the season, you got to go on the road to play Kansas. I think Kansas is going to be really good this year. They return more starters in this conference than any other program in this league. Then you got to play Texas on the road. We already know that Texas is the favorite to win this conference. They're one of the most talented teams in college football this year. And when you look at Texas Tech's roster, they got a lot of talent. When you think of Texas Tech, if you're somebody who doesn't really keep up with them all that much, you may think, JT, they're going to be good on offense, but they're not going to have a good defense. Well, it's kind of the complete opposite. Like, their defense should be really good this year. Their defense was pretty good last season. Their defensive line is going to be solid. You got Tony Bradford returning. He was second on the team in sacks last year behind Tyree Wilson. You got Jalen Hutchins returning. Your linebacker unit is going to be pretty good. Dadrian Taylor, a.k.a. Rabbit. I think this guy is incredibly underrated. I think he's probably one of the best, if not the best, defensive back in the Big 12 going into this season. This guy had 5 interceptions. You got Malik Dunlap. You got key transfers. Steve Linton, transfer from Syracuse. You got C.J. Baskerville, transfer from San Diego State. He's going to be manning that star position. It's like that slot corner hybrid safety role where he's going to be asked to do a lot of things. He's going to be blitzing off the edge. He's kind of going to be like another tackler in situations. He's going to be asked to man up against those slot receivers at times. This is somebody who is long, lanky, and super athletic. So the defense, I don't really have any concerns about. Now, I do wonder who's going to step up and replace that production of losing Tyree Wilson. But other than that, this is going to be one of the better defenses in the Big 12 this season. Now, the question really is going to be on offense. And although they do return the majority of the starters that they had last year, they had some issues on the offensive line, especially at offensive tackle. Now, from what I've been reading, they flipped the positions of the left tackles and the right tackles that they had starting last year. So the guy they had starting at right tackle last year is going to be playing left tackle this year. He was really good. And the guy who they had starting at left tackle last year, he was awful. So they're going to be moving him and flipping him to right tackle. So I'm interested in seeing how that transpires. They acquired the center in the transfer portal who has a lot of familiarity with the system. And when you look at the skill position group, they have a lot of talent and depth at wide receiver. They have some issues when it comes to speed. A lot of people are saying that their receiving core is more based off having big physical receivers, more possession type wide receivers. They weren't really explosive when it came to generating big plays in the passing game or in the run game. But they did acquire a transfer from Austin Peay and Dre McCray, who was one of the fastest receivers in the transfer portal. So you're going to have that aspect of your offense improve. You're now going to have a wide receiver that's going to be able to stretch the field and give you those explosive plays that you're looking for. You're going to have somebody who you can throw a screen pass to or a bubble screen to, and he can turn it into 20, maybe 30 yards. You're going to have somebody who's going to be able to stretch the field and give you those big 40, 50-yard vertical passing plays down the field with Tyler Shuck returning at quarterback, and this guy has a really big arm. And then you got Jared Bradley, who was in his freshman season last year. He was one of the best freshman wide receivers in college football last year. So this receiving core returns a lot of production. They got a lot of depth. You find some speed with Dre McCray, transfer from Austin Peay. The run game, I don't really know if they're going to be airing the football out a lot. I don't know if they're going to put a little bit more emphasis on trying to get the run game going, because the run game kind of has similar issues that the passing game had, with the fact that they weren't able to generate a lot of explosive plays in the run game. You got Taj Brooks, who returns. Now, he's a pretty good back, but he doesn't really have that second gear that people are looking for. But I think for the most part, even though this team doesn't have a lot of speed, they have a lot of size, they have a lot of physicality. And when you look at the Big 12, this isn't a conference that has, great defensive backs that translates well to the NFL. So I think that Texas Tech, the fact that they don't have a lot of speed may be a little bit overblown. I don't really think you got to have guys running 4-3 and 4-4 all up and down your roster. I think the fact that they got Dre McCray out of the transfer portal is going to be able to address that issue. And I think that Jared Bradley is going to be in for a big season. Taj Brooks, yeah, he's not the most explosive back, but the guy is super consistent. He was averaging over 4 yards per carry last year behind a really porous offensive line. And Tyler Shuck, this is somebody who has a lot of potential to be a high draft pick in the NFL if he's able to stay healthy. He was 5-0 as a starter last season when he was healthy. When you look at Texas Tech, man, the way that their schedule lines up, having more of their toughest games at home and only having to go on the road late in the season, that benefits them. And I think that the floor for Texas Tech this year is 8 wins. And their ceiling probably could be 10. Now, maybe you can say 11, but I think 11 is kind of pushing it. But I think the floor is 8 wins. The ceiling is 10, maybe 11. Now, if I had to give you guys a record prediction right now, I probably would say they win 9 games. Maybe they go 10-2 maybe. This is a really talented team. Although you got some concerns on the offensive line, I do expect the offensive line to be better. I don't really know how their offensive tackle situation is going to pan out, but this defense is going to be really good. You got weapons at wide receiver. The running back room is pretty good. You don't have that explosiveness, but as I mentioned earlier, you don't need a team full of speed demons to be a good team. And what really got me motivated to make this segment about Texas Tech is the fact that I was scrolling on Instagram a couple of days ago, and on my Explorer page, I had On3, who was giving out their early New Year's Six bowl game projections, and they had Texas Tech in the Cotton Bowl squaring off against Alabama, which means that they think that Texas Tech could potentially win the Big 12 over Texas. And for the first time in a while, Texas Tech actually is going into this season with legitimate expectations. They're probably going to end up starting out in the top 25. They're going to have a really big game earlier in the season against Oregon, which I think most definitely is a winnable game, even though Oregon, in a lot of people's eyes, are probably going to be a dark horse college football playoff contender. But outside of that Oregon game, I mean, you playing Kansas State, TCU, you're playing some of your best competition at home. I think Texas Tech, man, this may be the year that they possibly break through. You got Texas and Oklahoma, who after this season, they're about to depart for the SEC. So if you're looking for a program that could potentially take this conference by the throat, it could be the Red Raiders with their head coach, Joey McGuire. They're recruiting at a pretty good level. I've seen them in a couple of 5- and 4-star recruits. Top 5s. It's a 5-star receiver. I can't think of his name right now, but I think he has Texas Tech in his top 3 or his top 5. Like, this program has a lot of momentum right now, and it's well-deserved. They won 4 straight games last year. They beat the brakes off Ole Miss, which a lot of people didn't really see that one coming. If you're looking for a team that could kind of be a sleeper team that people are overlooking and kind of looking under the radar, it could be Texas Tech. I think they're in a prime position not only to have a good season, but also to be the team that ends up being the top dog in the new Big 12 once Texas and OU leave. And I believe that if they end up having a good season this year, their recruiting most definitely is going to pick up. They had the 27th ranked recruiting class last year. So I think that they definitely are going to end up building on that. And there are recruits that they're kind of in the mix for right now that they weren't in the mix for years ago. So that goes to show you that a lot of recruits are taking notice of what's transpiring at Texas Tech, and I'm pretty sure they got a pretty good alumni base. This is a Texas-based school. You already know that those pockets run fat up there in the state of Texas. It just seems like they don't run out of money. Like, SMU is spending bread. SM freaking U. What does SMU stand for? Southern Methodist University? They spending money. They getting active in the transfer portal. So if Texas ends up having a 9-10 win season, this is going to be a program that a lot of people are going to be having their eyes on going into 2024. And there's already a good amount of people who have their eyes on Texas Tech going into this year. But if they could end up winning 9-10 games, that could really get the ball rolling. But this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Leave us with a 5-star review if you enjoyed this episode. Share this podcast with your friends, family members, acquaintances on all of your social media platforms. And I will see you guys shortly with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.